Hello, and welcome to this week's Tech Tuesday with Scale Science. On today's episode, we build and install a set of upgraded dampers for our Project D5. We've had 6 solid months of drive time under our belt with the D5, and it has been an impressive chassis to say the least. However, with any chassis, there's always room for improvement, and the first thing that this chassis needed was some upgraded dampers. First up was this Yokomo big bore shock set. It's Kashima coated, which is a hard anodizing process that fills all the micro abrasions and pores to create a smooth surface that's tough against abrasion. That should eliminate a majority of any stiction or friction that you will feel as the damper travels through its stroke. The kit comes with all the necessary hardware needed to assemble your dampers. However, we can't leave well enough alone, so we plan to make some further adjustments in search of the optimum performance. The first stop on that trip is going to be a set of springs. Now, we opted for these Reve-D springs, however, feel free to use any springs that will fulfill your needs. Make sure to pay close attention to the overall height, and that is the reason why we opted to use the YD2 rear springs all around on the D5, so we could compensate for the overall height that those dampers require. Next up, we grabbed some aluminum spring retainers in a 0mm offset from Reve-D. What I like about these is that they will cup the springs and not allow the spring to fall out of contact with the retainer, even if the suspension is fully unloaded. They're a certain improvement over the stock plastic spring retainers. They look nice and they weigh next to nothing. We then opted for some Yokomo pure silicone shock oil. This is the 100. They come in these nice, small, easy to travel and easy to fill bottles. And I know this is something everyone should keep in their pit bag. We'll wrap out today's install with some of these Yokomo socket ball studs. They are a specific size to Yokomo, and unfortunately our D5 ball studs just wouldn't work. On the top, you can see what a stock plunger looks like. On the bottom, this is our modified plunger. We have added 4 additional holes with a 1mm hand drill to allow our plungers to flow more fluid and reduce their dampening force. Be cautious when drilling your plungers to ensure that you are drilling perfectly vertical and that you are cleaning and deburring all of the holes to be free from any debris or imperfections. Next, we'll begin the assembly process. I suggest running it like an assembly line, moving from one task to the next to ensure that you have completed all in the exact and identical way. We'll then put our first E-clip onto the piston shaft. I like to do all of the shaft's first clip and then move to installing the plungers and the second clip as a second task. Clutch move! As Andy, or Manji Madness from our show, put it, I figured out a way to do it with another tool, and I thought that way was great. But I'm telling you, these E-ring clip tools from TAMIYA are the bee's knees, and every single person that has ever built a damper should have this tool. We'll continue assembly by installing the plunger on top of the E-ring snap clip. We'll follow that up with the secondary E-ring snap clip, and that will need to be snapped into place. Continue and repeat these steps for the next 3. Now we can dig into the next section of our parts bag. I first installed the O-rings into the upper spring retainers. Next, we ditched the stock white O-rings for these low friction blue O-rings, part number YS7HG. I like to begin installation of O-rings by coating the O-ring entirely in the oil. I even laid some here on the threads. Usually I would opt for O-ring grease, but in this case, the O-ring and threads being coated in oil should allow a great seal surface between the shaft and the O-ring, without the O-ring grease causing any further friction. With the O-ring fully seated, we'll then install our retainer and cap. At this point, it's time to install your plastic ball cups. Wire cutters provide the most accurate way to grab the final thread on the shaft and ensure that you do not cause damage to any of your surfaces. I needed to check some sizing to ensure that we were going to have the stroke length desired for our D5 build. Now at this point I had to slip up on some ice. You know how we do. I had to get one of these TAMIYA air oil removers, or essentially a shock pump. Helps you get all those micro bubbles and things out of your shocks by creating a vacuum chamber inside and forcing all of the air to move to the upper surfaces and escape. In no way would I say this is mandatory. However, after years and years of building dampers, I want to see what all the hype is about with these damper pumps and really feel for myself if this makes a difference. Really simple to use. First, installing the dampers into the corresponding holes that would allow them to sit vertical. I then filled each damper up with oil to the very top surface. Don't forget to plunge and rotate the piston shaft to begin the process of air removal. We'll then install the lid. Keynote: make sure to add a little thin coat of oil to the rubber gasket between the lid and the body, ensuring that you get a nice seal between the lid and the body. Ours was a little dry and actually came unsealed after a few minutes of being under vacuum. Finally, apply the vacuum pump and give it up to 20 strokes to create the proper amount of vacuum in the chamber. Fast forward 30 minutes and we will release the vacuum on the chamber, remove the lid, and begin the next step. We can now install our bladders. Our third damper was not quite full enough and it created an air pocket between the bladder and the fluid, so we'll need to add a little bit more fluid to ensure a good performance. An air bubble will cause uneven dampening. Make sure not to over tighten your top caps, as that can create a bad seal and be a source of leaks. But wow, does the dampening look nice and smooth and very equal between all of the dampers. This is going to be an amazing performance increase for our little D5. At this stage, our final step of assembly is installing the spring and the spring retainer onto the damper. What a beauty. Came out awesome and they feel buttery smooth. We wrap up our installation by installing our dampers onto the chassis. We did have to swap those ball studs on the rocker arm, and we used the ball stud supplied with the big board kit for the upper that mounts to the shock tower on the chassis. Our stocks were just a little too small. Overall, what a nice tidy fit and finish these dampers added to the D5. I really am impressed with them overall for the price. I know there's nicer stuff out there, and believe me, we'll try them out soon. Some things to keep in mind is everyone's car is unique, so what your damper build may require could be different than ours. However, have some fun, experiment, and find out something that works for you. In the meantime, take some videos, tag them up with So Cooler, throw them up on Instagram or YouTube. Let us check out what you're doing with your car. If you have any suggestions for a future Tech Tuesday, drop them in the comments below. We'll see you next week.